Friends and families. I'm Dr. Ashley Bennett, co-leader of Accept, which is Admissions Community Cultivating Equity and Peace today. And I have the honor of being your moderator for this evening. We're excited to discuss student life and activism with you today. In the interest of time, I ask that all of our panelists just share their introductions in the chat. You'll see me share those with you momentarily. And in their introductions, they'll be sharing who they are, where they work, and why this particular topic speaks to them. Please use the chat feature to participate in the conversation. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature so that I'm sure to catch all of your questions and we can voice over. And with that, we'll take a breath and go ahead and get started. So I will direct the first question to Sophia. Sophia, could you please give an example of the various types of activism students can get involved in college?
Hi, everybody. So first of all, I just thought it'd be appropriate to define activism, and it's the use of a direct action to achieve an end either for or against an issue. So that being said, first of all, Black folks in our existence, persistence, and striving to better ourselves, thrive and flourish is a form of activism in itself. So I would encourage students to think about what's their purpose, what's their passion, and to basically see how that aligns with the opportunities that might be available on their campus. It's really important to think about the environment that you're in today, because perhaps your high school environment might be reflective of or not reflective of the type of university environment you aspire to be in. If activism is high on a list of your priorities and having community and comrades in arms is at the top of the list, then I would suggest that you definitely take that into consideration when you're making your list of right fit schools. So there's a number of ways you can participate. There's going to be student organizations that are really dedicated to the advancement of any of the causes that you're interested in, but for the purposes of this conversation, Black student unions are a good place to start. There's also going to be opportunities on and around campus to participate. And I would say that a huge number of students, according to many studies out there, are aware that racism exists on their campus, and the spectrum of how it exists is really broad reaching. So you will be able to find people to collaborate with. And it's important that you do what's within your comfort zone and realize that activism takes really many forms. Black people have been activists in music, using music and the arts, becoming politicians. And for example, by choosing your occupation even, there's architects who are reimagining cities because they haven't been planned with Black folks in mind. There's organizations like Black Space that are really helping to plan a future where Black people are able to thrive. So I know we're going to go into later in this discussion about what it means to cause good trouble and how to participate in different types of institutions and become activists. So I'm going to turn it over and see if anyone else has anything to add.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have gotten to the core of the matter. Did you have anything else to share before we move on?
At the moment, well, okay, so as an example, I'm overseas in Bali. So I wish I could be out there in the streets or on campuses, but the reality is I'm not. So my contributions are around helping people to imagine better futures and look at the outcomes. There's a myriad of ways to be an activist. And I think what you have to do is do a lot of reflection about what your strengths, what your passions are, and what contributions that are unique to you that you can make, and that's within your zone of influence. That's the most salient advice that I would have to offer students, parents, families, teachers. What is your zone of influence, and how can you make a difference there?
Thank you very much for that, Sophia. So since you brought up good trouble, I'll direct my next question to Andrea. Could you please describe and define good trouble, which is a phrase coined by Congressman John C. Lewis? How does it apply to college students? And what does it mean to you?
Right. So John Lewis, oh my God. So good trouble, especially now in the age of this civil racial unrest, is something that we must engage in. So we know that John Lewis in himself was the youngest person to speak at the March on Washington, which leaves an example to us that you don't have to be a certain age to engage in activism. And that's what he was saying by good trouble, is that when we see something that is not right, we have a duty as decent human beings, but especially as it pertains to racism and inequality and things that are not equitable, as Black people and Black students, especially, we need to speak out and speak up. So, using our voice, good trouble, not being afraid to sit at the table, to make the table, to invite yourself to the table, to stand in the gap. Good advocates stand in the gap for those that aren't able to use their voice or too afraid to use their voice. So I think when we think about good trouble as it relates to students, just being bold enough to have the initiative to step out and speak out on things that may not be right, not just on our college campuses or in our high schools, but in the world, in the right now, especially go vote. I know we're not, I'm plugging in my little plug about voting when talking about good trouble, because what other um, aspect to remember John Lewis by is to get out and vote. That's the biggest thing, biggest way we can use our voice in this country is to get out and vote. So students organizing voting polls, or getting out to vote, encouraging your classmates to vote, all of that is engaging in good trouble.
I've been in some good trouble and some bad trouble in my life. Just wanted to point that out for everyone with us this evening. Good trouble is the kind you want. Okay, so as we think about activism, as we think about, as you just mentioned, Andrea, the civil and racial unrest, and we talked about it before we went live, it gets exhausting. And it's hard, especially if you have this Black skin and kinky hair and you do not fit the prototype of the dominant culture, also known as white people. If you don't fit neatly in that box, life is already a bit more cumbersome, I'll say. And so then if you add a layer of activism, speaking truth to power, et cetera, it can cost you. It can cost you professionally, personally. It can affect your mental and physical health. So if we think about all of those things, Naomi, how do you suggest students who are passionate about activism and speaking up, how do you suggest they take care of themselves?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was super excited to get this question because in retrospect, this is definitely an area I wished I had figured out when I was a student in undergrad, because being an activist was all encompassing for me. I was at a PWI, and I was the first in my family to go to college, and I was coming to college after having participated in a busing program that came out of the civil rights movement, right? So it was kind of, part of in the cards that I was going to be an activist. Like it was given. And I jumped right on that. I saw a lot of issues with the way students of color were supported, or rather not supported, at my PWI. I had come from a very supportive environment in Boston, where I went to high school. I had mentors, I had support. So I knew what it took to be successful because it had been taught to me. I'm a graduate of an Upward Bound program. Like, I know what you need to be successful. So, I put that into action, but I forgot the whole academic success part. So, class became an afterthought, which no, we can't do that. So my biggest piece of advice for students who are currently serving on their campuses is don't forget that you're a student. Go to class, study, play in the intramurals. I highly encourage you to join an activity where you are not a leader, an activity that is so opposite of anything else that you do. For me, it was gospel choir. You know, one of my mentees wanted to start a gospel choir at our school. I can't sing a lick, but I showed up to every practice. And I know that she didn't want me to, but I was there because it was the one activity where I was not in charge and I could just exist. And it was great. But I think it's really just remembering that, you know, as much as you want to fix your institution and create change in the world around you, you still need to participate and show up and just enjoy. Because for a lot of us, particularly, you know, the first gym folk, like we're the first in our family to do this. We want to do the fun stuff. We want to go study abroad. Like it never crossed my mind to study abroad because I was so committed to fixing my school in those 4 years. But like in retrospect, I could have, you know, flourished if I had gone abroad to Spain, like so many of my classmates did, you know, but I never gave myself that chance. So I think definitely enjoy these amazing institutions that you will attend pretty soon and all of the resources that you have access to. And don't always take on the responsibility of fixing everything, right? Because you can share that burden. You know, the institution has some responsibility in this conversation. So remember that you are a student, lead with that identity, and, you know, and continue to do the work, obviously, right? But remember that you're a student first.
Anyone else have anything to add about self-care?
So I think that self-care, right, it puts a guilt trip on you. Like you feel like you're supposed to be the one to do the work. You're supposed to be the one to lead the organizations. You're supposed to be the one to show up to every protest, every rally, every meeting, everything. No, because if you are the only one doing this work, then people are going to look to you as being the only one to do the work. You know, so understand what it means to unplug. I talk to my students about this all of the time. And so for the folks who just joined, I work at the University of North Texas as the director for fraternity and sorority life. And I talk to my students all the time about being that over-involved student, being the one who has to feel like if they're not there, then the work didn't get done. Well, as a leader, if that's how you feel, then what does that say about your leadership skills if you have not prepared everybody to get the work done? And one day when you fall out in the middle of the president's office because you at your 12th meeting for the week and you can't go to your calculus class for 3 days, your mama and daddy or your guardian is gonna be like, baby, you came here to get these grades. You didn't come here to change the whole world of University of North Texas. And so I think that when we talk about that self-care piece, right, you gotta know how to unplug yourself and understand that the revolution went on before you and the revolution will go on well after you. You could take 3 days to chill, work out, binge on Netflix, whatever self-care looks like for you. And I had to learn that lesson. I'm still learning that lesson at 39, right? Like I still have to understand as a grown whole adult that I can't say yes to everything. And so as college students, to Naomi's point, come with that identity, lead with that identity, adopt the revolutionary if you're there, but also understand that the revolutionary is not just one cookie cutter definition. Like, you know, I have an identical twin brother. He also works in higher ed. He's also Dr. Shirley. Both of us do the same thing, but I'm more of the political activist. I mean, I've got John Lewis and Dr. Huey P. Newton in my blood, you know, members of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. That's what we do. My brother, he's more of a, all right, let me donate to people who have been, donate to bail money for people who've been arrested at the protest. Let me have conversations with students on career readiness because he works in career development. Let me talk to them about how to navigate predominantly white spaces as people of color. You know, so the revolutionary doesn't have one set identity. And so understand the fact that you may have to navigate and vacillate between those when it comes down to that self-care piece, because I may need to be an active, forward-going revolutionary, or I may need to be more of a background type of, all right, I'm not gonna be out there on the line, but I'm gonna be here at headquarters, making the phone calls or figuring out who needs bail money or writing the letters. So give yourself that permission, that space just to be.
Thank you for that, Zach. And I would love to hear from Sophia and Andrea, but I just wanted to double down on what you just said. And the best example I can think of, which isn't an accurate example, I'll get into that in a second, but the best example I can think of is the dichotomy between Malcolm and Martin, right? So when we hear who Martin Luther King was and when we hear who Malcolm X was, we are on both ends of the spectrum, right? One extreme or the other. Malcolm's persona was the revolutionary, the picture of him holding the rifle, the best picture in the history of pictures ever taken, but he's standing at a window with a rifle. Like, that's what you think of when you think of Malcolm X. Okay, when you think of Martin Luther King, you think peace, turn the other cheek, let's march together and pray together. And they both had those characteristics. Like, especially when you shift to the middle and the end of their lives, they were kind of on various ends of the spectrum. So first, if your history lessons are not all inclusive, which they're not because America, right? If your history books are not teaching you the full range of who they were as people, as men, as revolutionaries, I challenge you to look into that, because you don't have to be one way. And activism isn't always the marching, the active protest, the in your face action, right? As Dr. Shirley just so eloquently put it, we're all needing the revolution in some capacity. So if you are an excellent writer, write some letters. If you have connections, pick up the phone. So you don't have to be that person on the front lines in order to be effective. And I just wanted to tell Dr. Shirley, I really appreciated that point being raised. Sophia, Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we all know that the emotions that come with activism and just being Black in this world are extremely volatile, and they do take a whole toll on you. Like, the emotions that you carry in your body follow you throughout your life all the way through. There's more and more research being done about racial trauma, generational trauma. So it's really real. And I'm in my late 30s now, as of last week. And it took me a lifetime to realize how much all these little day-to-day microaggressions and gaslighting and things I had to wonder about over the course of my life really affected my self-esteem, my feelings of worthiness, and how I've navigated a lot of different situations. And until I faced that head on, I wasn't really, it was like a ghost or a boogeyman. And I really am thankful, as painful as a lot of this movement is today that's happening right now. I'm so thankful that it's out there, because like the Me Too movement, when it's behind closed doors and nobody's talking about it, you're sitting there wondering by yourself, am I crazy? Is this just me? But knowing that all these years I have not been imagining shit has been a very liberating experience. It's infuriating, but it's liberating at the same time. And another thing I would say is just that a lot of this movement is about what we don't want. We don't want Black people being killed. We don't want racist history being taught. But I also encourage people to use their imagination to think about what we do want. What does the desirable futures of your life and the collective Black community around the world in the diaspora, what does that look like? And for example, Wakanda is the most easily accessible portrayal of this in mainstream media, but you can look to things like Afrofuturist literature, speculative arts, and all kinds of ways. What are the solutions? What is your contribution to the solution? So not only are we looking at what the problems are, we need to be thinking about solutions and what contributions we can make to creating that ideal world where we're able to thrive as individuals and as a collective. So there's a lot of dismantling to be done, but what about the building? Those things have to happen kind of at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I was just going to piggyback what Dr. Shirley said when he brought up that we all have different spaces in which to engage in activism. And that was such a good point. But I wanted to share with students that are watching that realizing those spaces is a process. I work with students a lot on racial identity development. So just coming into your own, um, in my late 30s now too, and it's still a process, finding my space, finding my voice, and it evolves. Like I may have been once, I was that writer and I'm writing letters, but now I find tables, I make tables, I collaborate, and it's ever evolving on your role in activism. Like you don't have to stay in one space. Like you may be a great speaker, but you don't always have to speak on behalf of everybody. Find other gifts and delegate. Find other people. Like if you have friends that may be shy, but hey, girl, you're a good writer. Can you sit down and help me execute these letters so we can get them to our representatives and ask for things that we do want, like Sophia said, utilizing every aspect of your strengths, your skills, your identity, and be open to that evolving and finding different spaces in which to engage in activism. I don't know if it was Sophia or Dr. Shirley that said that activism has this connotation that we're standing outside with picket protesting, but that's not always the case. Being open-minded about how to engage in activism.
Yeah, and I wanted to build on the point that Sophia shared about coming with solutions. I think I've been watching very closely at a lot of the activism that's been going on at my alma mater, and being able to watch those students and how angry they can be. Because I remember, being on campus and still having to suffer through a little bit of the acceptability politics and, how we do perform good trouble and all that. And that was hard because I was angry when I was in undergrad too. And a little bit of that got stomped out of me, but it forced me to be more solution oriented because I'm like, all right, cool, I get it. You're paying attention to me. I'm a voice that's listened to. But then what? What am I bringing to the table? And it forced me to really do the research and do the work. And what am I asking for? I know I want support, but what does that look like? And looking at like institutions and, morphed into a little career in student affairs and I got lucky. But I think what's really important is that you don't just look to burn the house down and don't look to the house to have the answers. If they knew how to serve students of color, we wouldn't be where we are today. That was my take on it, right? Like if they knew what they were doing, they wouldn't need me to be this upset and angry. So I think it's a balance, right? Of being angry, of being upset, of having your emotions, but then also remembering they don't know how to do this. So I need to also say this would be helpful, or I need this, or I need that. Even if you don't have a solution, be clear with what your wants and needs are, because I think that's important for folks who are listening to hear and to receive from you. And then I think the other piece about self-care that I wanted to share is allowing yourself to be human. I think I loved when Ashley brought up Dr. King and Malcolm X, because what I have found most interesting about both of those figures is reading what their wives had to say, right? Like seeing that other side. And it's like, oh, so y'all were real people. Like Dr. King wasn't just Dr. King. Like there was some stuff going on there. And I'm like, all right, so he human too. So I can have my faults, right? So if my self-care doesn't look like candles and yoga, it's okay. And I can be human and I can be real and I can do what I need to do to get me where I need to be so that I can do the work. And that's okay. And I can't tell you how important that has been for me to learn, because again, we magnify these greats in our culture and we put them up on these pedestals and they can do no wrong. And that's exactly how I think I want my son to learn about Dr. King. But eventually we're gonna have to have the conversation. Dr. King was a man and he did things that men do. And that's okay. I saw Dr. Shirley give me an eye, but I'm a hush now.
Okay. Listen, Dr. Shirley is the only man on the panel and he has to represent his people. I respect it. He came off mute, so I'm a hush. He has something to say.
Men can be trash. I'm gonna just say that.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you.
I'm gonna say that.
For validating.
I'm gonna shut.
All right, and we went back on mute. So along those same lines, I actually had a thought when several of you were speaking. And so for a moment, indulge me, I want to speak directly to young Black women, Black girls, because self-care is something that I don't believe we engage in nearly enough. We have taken on this role as the mule, right? So we're carrying the burdens of Black folks on our back. We're carrying womanism on our back because, you know, feminism isn't for us. We are carrying whatever baggage and trauma that comes with our multiple identities. And then we're supposed to show up and show out every day. We're supposed to lead all the committees, and we're supposed to cook for your husband and feed the children and, you know, all those things, right? Because misogyny and racism, you know, directly affect us. And I'll be vulnerable for a second and tell you, the reason I have a doctorate is because I know that I will not be given the same opportunity as a cute white girl who comes to the table with the same level of education and experience. So I've got to give myself a little edge. And it's not right, y'all. It's not right. I was big and pregnant, waddling to my doctoral classes, but I finished because I knew that I had to do it to create the kind of opportunities I wanted to create for myself and to create the kind of life I wanted for my children. I say that to say a doctorate might not be your end goal, right? Like, whatever. But young Black women, I won't say gone are the days where you don't have to be better and all of that, right, to compete. However, in your quest to level up, take care of yourself. And as Naomi just said, it may not be candles and yoga and brunch or whatever the case may be. For you, it could be an hour of trash TV. That's cool. That's okay. Take care of yourself. I am not ashamed to say I watch all the real women of whatever city, continent, how foolishness, and I can tell you all their business, and I'm just into it. But for me, that's an escape. And so don't feel guilty about not practicing self-care the same way you're seeing it celebrated in social media or on television or whatever. You take care of you however you need to do it, because we didn't make this mess, but we are really the ones who are actively trying to clean it up. So I will move on because I know we can stay there for quite a while. And I see Dr. Shirley fidgeting. He can't even sit still.
You know, I just want to say one thing. Ooh. Black men, we have to do better at taking care of our Black women. And so when I said earlier that men can be trash, we can be. And it's not all of us, right? But there are a majority of us who feel like we should be able to go off and do our little thing on the side and come home to our wives. Well, they go home to their wives because I identify as an openly gay Black man. So, and that's another thing. Like, I can see things. I see things on both sides. But anyway, we have to do better at taking care of our Black women because of the fact that the burden oftentimes rests on Black women to fix, solve, and take care of everything. When I was growing up, I love my dad, adore my dad. We never had a problem. Mama. My mama said, or my mama told me, or my mama made me, or my mama's gonna do this. And my dad taught me very fundamental things about being a man, but it was always like, I knew the quick fix was gonna be my mom. You know, and that's not the narrative for everyone, but I have found with a lot of my students, that is the narrative of them. Conduct conferences, mama gonna be the first one there. Conversation about the bill, mama's calling. Issues with financial aid, well, my mama wanna talk to you. You know, I mean, so for Black women, the emotional labor that you all have to expel, especially in situations like this and also have to take the opportunity or the time or the space to have something for yourself, Black men, we got to do better. And that is why I think that, number one, we have to acknowledge as Black men the privilege that we have. I've heard a few Black men say, we don't have no privilege. We don't have no privilege. We're in America. I said, we got privilege over Black women. At the end of the day, we can walk into a room with our wife or our girlfriend or our partner, and she is identifies as a woman, and they'll turn to us before they turn to her. And we got to get out of this mindset that women are subservient to men, because of course there's this whole biblical mentality, and I mean, that's a whole nother panel conversation. But when you look at degree completion and collegiate enrollment, Black women surpass Black men. So gone are the days of this subservient mentality and things of that nature. You know, I may have some brothers that say to me that because I identify as an openly gay man, I don't understand. But I have Black parents. I got a Black mama. I have an older sister. I have a younger sister. I have friends, colleagues, sorority sisters, all coworkers, all of that. Bomb ass Black women. And we need, as men, period, no matter how we identify, we need to use our privilege to create spaces for our Black women. Because if we're not, then what good are we doing? Now I'm gonna shut up.
Well, this next question is actually for you, so you might as well.
I'm not gonna shut up then. And I'm back.
Boom. We want to draw on your experience as an administrator in higher ed. And because you are at UNC, I know you can speak to this as it is a PWI. So if I am a Black student and I'm choosing to attend a PWI, right? I'm one of the few. And I'm vocal, I'm an activist, I speak truth to power. What are some of the things I should expect to contend with as I walk through my college experience?
You should expect to be ready to be viewed probably as public enemy number one. Let me just get that shit out the way right now. You should be ready to be viewed as someone who, I'm aging myself when I say this, but you may be ready to be you should be ready to be viewed as someone who has the scarlet letter on, right? Like the person who essentially is, when they see you, you're that troublemaker. So you have to really be ready to be prepared to do this work and stick with this work. Because listen, once you dip your toe into that pool, you might as well dive your whole body in. Because if you dip your toe into the pool and then you renege like spades, you're gonna be seen as fake and fraudulent. You dip your whole body in, you're gonna be seen as that troublemaker. Now there's good trouble attached to that, but they're gonna see you as a troublemaker first. You have to be ready even before you dip your foot in to decide what side you're wanting to be on. When I got to the University of North Texas, I was always the one who asked the questions. Why? This doesn't make sense. What are we doing about this? To where it reached me one day that one of my colleagues, in talking to another colleague, and this colleague let me know I was referred to as a radical threat. And so I'm not a student, but I think that for the students, this is a very, like, this can be a synonymous conversation, right? Like, you got to be ready to have that attached to your name. And then you have to be ready to identify how you're going to react to that. At first, I was pissed. I was upset. But then I said, you know what? Let me spin this. Because obviously I'm saying something that makes someone uncomfortable. But if I make you uncomfortable, so think about if you have a dirty fabric, right? A washing machine. There's a stain in a garment. In order to get the stain out, you have to agitate the fabric. And if you agitate it enough with cleaning solvent, that stain eventually comes out. Think about that with an issue that is at an institution. You may be that cleaning solvent to help agitate that situation to eventually get that stain out. Now, also keep in mind, you may not eradicate the whole stain. It may be someone that comes after you that adds something else to it. So you the laundry detergent, but somebody need to maybe add some bleach. You know, they may need to turn from cold water to warm water. But to be called a radical threat, I actually embraced that because of the fact that that meant that I was asking questions that made people realize we got a stain in this garment. And somebody needs to agitate it, and nobody has asked the question before. Now, I will also tell you as students, get ready to come in and be tired. You're gonna be tired every day. So to Naomi's point, you know, you're gonna go to class, you're gonna get involved, and then, oh, also it's time to march, or it's time to write the letters, or it's time to do whatever. Understand you're going to be tired. This work is not for the faint of heart, and it's not easy, and it's not quick. Don't expect instant gratification. And also, you have to be very, very resigned in the fact that the work that you do now may not manifest itself while you are at the institution, but you are doing the work to make things better for people who may come 2 years down the line. The work that we do oftentimes is not resulting in benefits for us, but for the people who come after us. So always keep that stuff in mind. Now, the beautiful thing is you can come back and witness the fruit of your labor. I'll give you a prime example. I was student body vice president at Paul Queen College my senior year. My twin brother was president. Paul Queen College used to have a curfew to be in a residence hall. We're AME school, religiously based school. On weekdays, you had to be in the residence hall by 11 p.m. Weekends, it was 12 a.m. No visitation. Our SGA administration, our senior year, said, we are going to work to eradicate this. It ended up working out, but the institution passed the new regulation in April. We graduated in May. We didn't get to take advantage of the no curfew regulation. We didn't get to take advantage of the visitation regulation, but the people who came after us did. But that is a thing that I can say that our administration did, even though we didn't reap the benefits, everybody else after us did. So you have to be ready to sometimes understand that the work that you do now is not going to be for you and your peers. But that's okay. That's okay, because that's servant leadership. And so if you are, if you're in this mindset of you want to protest, you want to break down the establishment, whatever terminology you want to use, understand you're going to get the scarlet letter. You may be seen as a radical threat. You may not reap the benefits of the work that you're doing. You're going to be tired, but it's going to bear fruit for other people being seen as someone who's radical and a threat and all of that, when you initially hear that, that's not fun. Like, you're like, I'm not a dangerous person. I just want things to be better. But for people who don't understand why you're doing the work, they're going to try to label you as whatever to discredit you, discourage you. Don't be focused on that. There's a quote where we talk about the revolution and how the young inherit the revolution. Dr. Huey P. Newton said, and I said it earlier, but young people, y'all always inherit the revolution. Like, oftentimes, students look to the administrators of the university to be like, well, you can make this change, you can make this happen. No, we can't. Because guess what? We are paid by the university, but you pay tuition. So if there's an experience that you want, make that known. So it's not easy. It's oftentimes a thankless job. But if you have that spirit of activism in yourself, like Naomi said earlier, like, I came to college knowing, hey, my dad was a Black Panther growing up. So I knew, like, it was in me to be able to be like, all right, I don't really like none of this. So we're going to just knock all this down. And luckily I went to HBCU to begin with, but for those who did not go and you start off at a predominantly white institution, you're going to encounter a lot of that. So either you're going to suit up and do the work, or you're just going to complain. Pick one.
Yeah, I wanna speak to that PWI experience because it's super important, and I think a couple pieces, right? Like, I definitely came to college with activism flowing through my veins, but I was tired. Like, it was a lot. My middle school, high school experience in an all-white town, and it was a lot. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I tried to avoid that table in the cafeteria where all the Black kids were sitting, because yes, that was still a thing in undergrad. But that lasted all of like one semester. And then, I needed friends. So I went and I sat at the table. And I became who I was on campus. And you're right, everybody and their mama knew who Naomi was and would come up to me and I'd be like, yeah, Timmy, Sally. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it was one of those situations, but you lean into it. I think what has really resonated with me that we've pointed out at different points during this conversation is the notion of privilege. Like, I am Black and Latino, right? Like, I can cross lines, I'm pale, like, I'm only tan in the summertime. Like, there are lines. I used to have a perm, like, these are new. I knew I passed at certain points. And I knew that administration saw me as acceptable. So like, I knew I was going to be let into the table. I was going to have a seat. But what was important for me and how I leveraged my privilege was you didn't know what I was going to say, but you let me sit at the table. So now he's going to have to listen to me. So it's just really important, I think, to do the work to get to know yourself and to see how you can sort of leverage all of those identities as you do the work in whatever field that may be. And just really, I think, if you lead with your heart and lead with all that you are, it becomes organic, right? It becomes sort of this thing that happens in the background of everything else. And it doesn't have to be something where you go out of your way to continuously do the work, but sometimes just showing up in your everyday life. And I know that may be a point that some of us are at this point in time, but even as you enter undergrad and you show up to meetings and you try out for clubs where nobody else looks like you and you want to be the first. Being the first is important. It is also hard, but being the first can just be enough sometimes.
Before we hear from Andrea and Sophia, if they have anything additional to add, I wanted to address a couple points made by Dr. Shirley and Naomi. first, it's hard. It's tough. It costs you something. And Andrea put in the chat, there is a cost to activism. 100%. It's okay if you're not willing to pay the cost. So think about that. Wherever you choose to attend college, if you are passionate about equity and if you are passionate about, shaking the table, right? Find a way to do that makes sense for you. You should not be going home or going to your dorm at the end of a day in tears. You should not be, experiencing various health challenges in college that you didn't experience before because now you're so stressed out, right? That's no way to live. And it's not your burden. You don't have to do this because you're Black, and you don't have to take up every cause, right? For me, I'm going to address anti-Blackness. I'm going to address any of the phobias, right? Xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, those kind of things, because that's my area of passion. It doesn't make me stronger or better than the next person who isn't addressing those things, because they could be looking into a whole cadre of issues that I know nothing about. So first, I just wanted to say, find your lane, right? Also, I wanted to share that the college landscape can look very similar to the professional landscape. So if you have decided it is in your heart to fight these fights, use college as a training ground. Because when you get out in the real world, those same people are gonna be in your office, the same people making decisions, passing laws. You have got to figure out how to navigate that. I started out, I was pretty much shrouded in Blackness through my entire K through 12 experience. Even when I attended, not necessarily Black middle schools or whatever, I found the Black folks, right? So I was always around Black people. Then I attended the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. Let me tell you something about a Black girl in Norman, Oklahoma. There were some times. However, I found my people. So for me, that self-care included finding my folks, tapping out when I needed to, and being okay with that. Like, if I don't have the energy or the capacity to take up these next 12 weeks of issues, that has to be okay. Because ultimately, I'm doing no one any good if I'm half-cocked, if I'm limping to the table to have the conversation. Because as someone pointed out earlier, and I'm so sorry I've forgotten who, we're not that important, y'all. Like, if you aren't there and there are people around you who are still passionate about the work moves forward. Don't feel like you are the one person that can move the needle. Because if you really want to be involved in activism, you got to find a group of folks who are doing that work with you. It doesn't serve you well to take it up alone. You definitely have a responsibility to yourself and to your family to check out when you need to. And as Dr. Shirley mentioned earlier, making space for other folks when it's appropriate. So though I don't have male privilege, I'm educated. I have, a steady income. I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from. So y'all see where I'm going. I have varying levels of privilege as well. So I can figure out, how do I help someone who doesn't have those privileges? And I know I'm saying a lot, but I really want y'all to understand that activism doesn't have to be this grueling, ugly, time-consuming, stressful thing that you do. Now, some of it is that because you're bucking the system, right? So it'll take a toll, but manage that for yourself. And also realize when you do go out into the workforce, or when you even entering relationships later in life, the tools you learn in college, I've been out of school. I graduated when Dr. Shirley did in 2005. So that's 15 years out of college. And I am still using those tools every day. Not the classroom knowledge, really, but that social side, navigating whiteness, speaking up for myself, advocating for others, like all of those things I learned in undergrad. And so, Andrea, Sophia, if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, basically, I was just going to add another piece to think about is interactions with white folks in the professional space, in school, in all that's happening. There are lots of people who want to be allies and even accomplices. Yet, this is the first time in history whiteness is actually a thing and so on display, because it's been the default that they don't really know what to do. And what happens? They come to you to educate them about the whole of critical race theory and everything else that comes along. And it's exhausting. And I just want to say that you're absolved from having to do that. Like, people want to do the work, they're going to have to buck up, do the internet research, find the resources themselves, and leave you the hell alone. Because it's really, really, really exhausting. For example, I was working on an article recently, and it's about media and marketing and the disservice that is done for the political discourse and everything else. And this person had the audacity to tell me that I should read some modern intellectuals, philosophers. And I knew exactly who they were going to mention. Somebody like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, more white men saying that all of us are looking for ways to further victimize ourselves and creating division in our country. And I was just like, I was infuriated, first of all, but I was just like, I don't know, not even surprised anymore. And I had to flip that back on them. And I was like, so have you read Sylvia Wynter or Octavia Butler? Or have you ever read any Black philosophers? Silence, right? Because they're just so oblivious sometimes that not everything revolves around them and their perceptions and the ways that they think the world works. So my point is not but at the same time, there has to be a spirit of collaboration and a willingness to reflect and listen and learn. So I'm still learning and figuring out how to tell people when to just shut the F up and I don't want to hear it, versus when I'm really ready to sit down and have a conversation. But I'm not going to do that unless you've done some quantifiable work yourself. And that means getting out of your comfort zone, watching Black television, not practicing in beliefs of Black exceptionalism, like basketball players and rappers and musicians, like actually showing that you have done a lot to try to really understand the experiences of the average Black person. Then we might have something to talk about, but I'm not going to give you the entire rundown and bear your burdens as well and harbor your guilt and stroke your ego and pat you on the back and give you acknowledgement. Oh, thank you so much for joining in our fight. No, you're human. That's what you're supposed to do. Can't you see I'm tired? So Black fatigue is a real thing, and it's coming from the pressure you put on yourself, but also the expectations that people often unjustifiably have of you to do their labor for them. And that's not yours to take on at all.
Yeah, and I just wanted, sort of picking up from that, I think it is important that on the other side, we allow ourselves to hear more viewpoints that sort of disagree with us. I think for me, in serving students nowadays, where I struggle the most is this notion of cancel culture. I can't get with it. And I've struggled to answer the why behind that, if I'm being completely honest with y'all. But I think that going back to undergrad and sort of placing the conversation there, like I was at, my institution at a time where a sort of whites only Christian group came up and they started having these rallies on campus, right? And, social media wasn't what it was for us to decide to just cancel them in the same way that these groups now are typically canceled and they just don't show up. Like, they had the rallies and we showed up and we went and we listened to them. And obviously there was some tension because a whole bunch of Black folks showed up to this, but we had conversations. Like, I was still taking my development of Western Civ class with half the group that was there. So it was like, you're gonna see me in class tomorrow. So you wanna talk to me now or you wanna talk to me then? Because we're gonna talk. You're gonna hear me. I have to hear you in your story every day. We're taking a 5-credit class on all your heritage, but you feel upset. What are you mad about? Because I can tell you what I'm mad about, but I'm interested to hear your side of the story. And I want students to remember that there is growth and discomfort. If you can learn to have these difficult conversations and confront these ideas that, completely oppose everything that you stand for, you are all the stronger for it. It is hard, it is difficult, it is stressful, but it is necessary because you cannot run away from everything that makes you feel uncomfortable. It is impossible. So learn how to have those difficult conversations in a safe space like college, right? Any good school is going to have a mental health center. Any good school is going to have some, student affairs folks of colors that they're going to send you to, right? They're going to have somebody to support you. You will have a safety net. I cannot always promise you that in the professional world, because these conversations will come, that you will have the safety net. So do it now, do it in undergrad, confront everything instead of running away and trying to cancel. And you might get something out of it.
Andrea, do you have anything to add?
I just wanted to add, I'm glad Naomi touched on it a little bit about students being comfortable enough to share their stories with other people. Particularly for me, I came from a very small town, a very country, small town, and then I attended a big PWI. And so my experience was very different. I actually didn't become engaged in activism until undergrad because it was like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for my entire life, to address these people and to address these issues and share my story. And then from that moment on, I'm continuously sharing my story. Of course, it has evolved, but being comfortable to say who you are, where you're from, your experiences, and don't let anyone devalue that. So when it's time to share in classes, speak up. Even in just in a class, somebody somewhere can learn something from you, can ask questions, you seem approachable. Just and create that environment where you're comfortable and saying, this is who I am. I have arrived. I deserve to be at this college. I deserve to be in this class, and you're going to hear what I have to say. So just being comfortable enough about your story and don't let anyone devalue it and or your experiences.
I want to talk a little bit more about Black exceptionalism since we have the time. And it resonated with me when Sophia mentioned it. I want to explain it a little bit because all Black people are exceptional, right? You are enough just as you are. You don't have to have special, unique, superhuman talents to have value. But the dominant culture can often view certain Black people as the exception. So I'll give a personal example. I worked for a affluent private high school in Houston for 5 years. And I didn't realize it until probably the end of my 4th year. My white colleagues viewed me as the exception until I said things they didn't like. So they cared about me and my family, but they voted against my best interests when I brought up issues of inequity or racism, sexism, etc. That wasn't received well. They wanted the educated, docile Negro, and I could only give them educated. I could not. I could not play the docile role. And because of that, I chose to end my tenure there. And I say that to say, you can find yourself in that trap and not realize it. Because I consider myself a reasonably intelligent person. And I'm pretty hip to issues of race, but it snuck up on me. I did not see it for years. And so you will find that, so LeBron James, for example, fantastic basketball player. We're not going to get into the Jordan, LeBron. I don't have time for that argument right now. He is a fantastic basketball player. And he has started to become more and more vocal in recent years as it relates to racism, police brutality, and the like. And if you want to understand exceptionalism, just check out his Twitter feed. Start at about 5 years ago, and then look at how he is being portrayed today. 5 years ago, it was, yeah, LeBron, thank you for this, and you're doing such a fantastic job. And these are white people commenting on whatever he posts. Now, because he is vocal and he is using his platform for advocacy work, those comments are ugly. It's because he moved from the exceptional Negro into, what did they call you, Dr. Shirley? A threat? What kind of threat?
A radical threat.
So now he's a radical threat, and he is not being treated the same way or received the same way as he was before. So if you find yourself in that exceptional bucket, you're not going to stay there for long. I'm going to just tell you that now. As soon as you say something that is counter dominant culture, as soon as you raise an issue that, they don't necessarily agree with, you're like all those other Black people. So I say that to say, stand in your truth. Be who you are. Do not try to align yourself with whiteness. Do not try to assimilate, because it always comes to light. Who you are will surface, and either they're going to love you or not. So you might as well start out being yourself in the beginning so you can really form some authentic friendships. And one more thing. I'm sorry.
No, Dr. Bennett, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, we're good. I was just going to say one thing on friendships before I mute myself and stop talking for the rest of the day. One more thing on friendships. You will make friends from different backgrounds. You will make white friends in your life, in college, whatever. And them loving you as a person and being your friend, and you all sharing, as friends do together, doesn't absolve them, and it doesn't excuse any of the isms or phobias. So if you find yourself in a friendship and you're just flummoxed when they say something racist, or when they tell you they support somebody in office, or whatever the case may be, remember, they are human, and it's not your job to educate them. But if you choose to stay in that friendship, it will behoove you to be as upfront as possible, because authentic friendships mean we can call each other out. We can have real conversations. You can see my point of view, and we can still be okay. And so I know that may seem like too in the weeds right now, but friendships are a huge part of college. Huge. You build your family away from home when you're on campus. And so you definitely want to be sure you're intentional about choosing people who you want to be in your life, who support you, who love you, and who will listen to you when you express the desires and the concerns of your heart. Dr. Shirley?
I was just going to say, real quick, Dr. Bennett, you made 2 points. Real quick. One, yes, who you are is always going to come out. I am 39 years old. I'll be 40 in February. And at this point in time in my life, I am not going to hide who I am. I have told many a person, I'm entirely too old, too Black, too gay, and too educated to front for anybody. So all this you're going to get. You're going to get the whole thing. All 5'3" of me. And it's going to come out. Number 2, real quick. Friendships. Yes. You got to be prepared to give all of these people, all of you, all the time, because if you don't, you're going to make yourself sick. Like internally, physically sick. I am not going to omit pieces of myself just for the comfort of other people. And I used to do that. And I used to feel like I was an imposter. You gonna get all this blackness. You gonna get this whole beard, this whole long beard. You gonna get, I'm loud, I'm country, I'm all of these things. But all of these things, when you look at people, right, like gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, education, organizational affiliations, vocation, these are all pieces of a puzzle. We're all puzzles. And if you can't accept one piece of me and I take that away, I'm no longer complete. And so why would I not complete myself just to have you in my life? Like that's doing a detriment to me.
I'm rarely speechless, but yes, and yes. I do want to frame the end of our conversation and just share that we don't intend to scare you. We don't intend to only share one side of student life and activism and advocacy, but we do think it's our responsibility as people who have worked in this field and people who've experienced this personally. It's our responsibility to share the challenges that will be associated with being Black in college. And that's what this entire series has been about. We share the joys and we share the successes, but we also share the other side because, there is a very real other side to this. And so I'm grateful for all the wisdom that was shared tonight. And it doesn't end here. Next week, we're offering a safe space for students who would just like to come in and ask questions, or parents, whoever would like to just come in and just talk about being Black in college, what it looks like, what you can expect, whatever your questions are, we'll be there to answer. And I just want to say it won't be in this webinar format and we won't record it. Because we want it to be safe and personal. And so the same way you exist on Zoom where you can see everyone, that's how that format will be. But just know we will not share anything that you share with us. We will not record. We will not post it on YouTube as we have our other sessions. It's 100% safe for students. So just wanted to put that plug in for next week. Before we head out this evening, I would like to give each of our esteemed panelists an opportunity to share any last minute wisdom, any final thoughts with the community today.
So I'll share. I think 2 days ago had the courage to finally share my viewpoint with the anonymous sort of Black at my institution Instagram account that has been chronicling sort of a lot of the microaggressions and racist happenings that have been happening on campus, since. Because a lot of alumni have anonymously posted and whatnot. So it's been a very sort of safe and I think in some ways rejuvenating space for me just to read and be like, okay, I'm not alone. I wasn't the only one. But as I was posting from the perspective of having been in student affairs for the last 10 years of my career, having, started a program when I was on campus that became institutionally supported and has flourished. I had this perspective that was very counter to the narrative that current students are placing, where they're just pretty much done with administration. And, I've reconciled their viewpoint and my own by saying that we all have our parts to play in the struggle. I'm definitely playing mine by donating and serving on my all-white reunion committee and just showing up. Like, I go here and you will not forget me. But I also recognize the place that their anger has in the process. So I think that all parts have to be honored as we engage. And then I also reminded students that it's our greatest form of resistance to find joy in the struggle, because they expect us to suffer. They expect us to be unhappy. And I will tell this to anyone who asks, college was the best 4 years of my life. And I will go back and do it over again and over again, as many chances as you give me. I loved my alma mater. I still do. I recommend it to my students, excitedly every time they ask about it. And I do that because it's important, because most students of color you ask that went there, they're like, ugh. But you know what? I had good times and I had great professors and I made great friends. My family, you know what I'm saying? I just got to meet my new baby nephew this weekend. And all that is important to me. And I will not let their ignorance and their racism rob me of that, because I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduate. And that is important. And I had all the fun parts too. And that matters. So that's my last thought. Thank you, guys.
I just want to leave with just to encourage students that are watching to take part in activism, take part in using your voice, to not be afraid, and to know that even though you may not have people on your campus, like Naomi said, there is somebody on the campus. But even if they're not, I know for as millennials loved college. You ask any Black millennial that is college educated, and they will be happy to share their experience with you. So you always have somebody to support you. And I wanted to encourage students to be trailblazers, especially now. We all know that this election is probably the most important election in our country's history. And right now is the prime opportunity to engage in activism, to engage in advocacy, and to use your voice. Um, I'm just excited for students entering college. They are about to embark on a journey that we didn't get to experience. So I will be the first to say I would live vicariously through um, young college students. Like Naomi said, I love my alma mater. I don't want to, I also wanted to not discourage anyone who's thinking of a PWI. Do attend if that's what you want. I'm back at my PWI doing my doctorate. I had an excellent time there, excellent experience, different from HBCU, but still an experience that was worth a lifetime. So just be encouraged, use your voice, seek help, ask questions, and then if you ever want to ask one of us, I'm pretty sure everyone on this panel will be able to offer you some advice.
Sophia or Dr. Shirley?
Yes. So, as mentioned, the election is coming up. So, one of the best lessons I've learned recently is, like, I'm in love with futures. That's what I study, that's what I'm doing research on. But the futures are very much being created now, too. So, it's like this arrow, there's pushes and there's pulls, and you have to learn how to ebb and flow with them. And it's really important to really focus on what's just ahead of you at this moment. So with the election coming up, it may be tempting to think about a lot of other things, but really just kind of take on your plate what it is that you can handle at the moment, and don't let yourself become overwhelmed with anything and everything. This is a long struggle. It's started way before us. It's going to go on way after us. What's within your control? What can you do now to democratize the conversation, decolonize the conversation? What can you do now or slightly down the line to democratize or decolonize the futures? But just do your best to strive for balance, really. You're going to learn a lot. It's going to be uncomfortable. Take the time to reflect and take the time to process a lot of things, and be very kind and gentle with yourself. We're all around the same age in this panel, and we are still learning hard lessons about the things we might have done when we were your age that we would have done differently, knowing what we know now. And we're still evolving and defining who we are. And it'd be very arrogant to assume that any of us has this all figured out. So just be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, and know that there's going to be times where you're like embarrassed, or you feel ashamed, or you have lots of victories to celebrate along the way as well. It's a journey, and that's the reward in all of this. And each day that you get to look back as long as you're moving forward and becoming more of your authentic self and somebody that you can be proud of, then that's what this is really embedded in. And those are the pillars of activism, right? Showing up as your most authentic self unapologetically and contributing to the collective good of your people and all people eventually. But we have our priorities front and center at the moment.
I echo everything everybody has said before. To the point of, I want you all to know as students going to college, HBCU, PWI doesn't matter. You want to go to school, go to school. Some people don't want to go to school, and that's fine too. Go with what's best for you. This whole PWI, HBCU debate, I can't stand it. It shouldn't be a debate. If you get a degree, you get an education. If that's the route you choose, live in that. There's an HBCU experience and there's a Black experience at a PWI. Mm-hmm. One is not better than the other one, but guaranteed, when you go to a HBCU, you're going to get an HBCU experience. When you go to a PWI, please seek out the Black experience at the PWI. Don't just sit in your residence hall room. Don't just go to class, go to the caf, go to your room, rinse and repeat. Seek that Black experience out. College is the best time of your life. I got my whole entire life in college. Some things I'll tell y'all, some things I can't. But understand that that's the time that you get to explore and discover yourself. So relish in that. 4 years or 5 years for some of us. Maybe 6, depending upon who you are. But take that in. Like, you get to make mistakes in college. You don't get to do that in the professional world. You get to try things out. Dr. Bennett made the point earlier of, let that be your training ground. You get to make mistakes in college and you're not going to get fired 9 times out of 10. You're still going to be able to get up and go to class another day. Do your trial and error stuff in college now, because when you get out in this real world, we all going to tell you on this panel, being grown is the lie that they sold us. You don't want to do it. It's a scheme by Todd to separate the family. So live your life in college. Like, do things that you have never experienced. Study abroad, join organizations, try different foods, hang out with different people. Figure out who you are and what you like. Because when you graduate, to Sophia's point, they're going to expect you to have it all together. And we don't. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I got a whole doctorate and been a director and an assistant. I don't know. I'm 39, finna be 40, y'all. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But guess what? That's okay. Sophia made the awesome, excellent point of the journey. So many people are focused on the destination. Pick up what you learn along the journey, because those are going to be your memories, y'all. None of us are never going to get to the destination because we don't know what the destination is. I want to be a vice president, or I want to be a president, or I want to be a CEO. All right. And what if you get there and you don't want to be that anymore? Then what? So enjoy your journey, y'all. Live your life and just take in those moments, those people, those nuggets, those memories, and cherish it. Because when you look back, you're going to sing some shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I'm pretty sure we all have probably sang those shoulda, coulda, wouldas before. But your blueprint and your journey is your own. So cherish that.
Well, I'll close out by sharing a story that I only share with the people who matter most to me. So you're welcome. I have to share about my paternal grandmother, Daisy May. So she's been gone for maybe 6 or 7 years now. And we knew her time was coming. She had cancer. So I had the privilege to sit at her bedside at the end of her life and, you know, just kind of talk and do her hair and all that kind of stuff. And I did way more listening than talking. You know, I got her gumbo recipe and just talking about life and asking her to share any wisdom with me. And what I noticed, she did not talk about work. She did not talk about accomplishments. She did not discuss, you know, inter-office politics and gossip. She talked about the people she loved. She talked about fantastic experiences she had. She talked about the people who mattered to her in life. And she talked about the immense level of joy she experienced on this earth. And so I leave you with that because that's what matters, y'all. Caring for yourself is super important. Caring for the people you love is super important. So this activism, this student life and digging your heels in college, that is important as well. But it is a small blip on the radar when you think about the wholeness and the totality of your life and who you are and how you show up in the world. So you are enough if you decide you aren't going to be an activist on campus. You are enough. You are deserving of peace and love and joy. Being Black does not automatically mean you have to suffer and struggle and toil and all of those things. Blackness is fantastic. I would not be born any other way. It comes at a cost. There's a quote, I think it's on Facebook, y'all, help me. But basically it was like, being Black is dangerous. It's lit though. And so I leave you with that. This will be available on YouTube. And so we'll post that as soon as possible. And for those who did register for the webinar, you'll receive our resources and things that we shared with you today. As a reminder, we're having the final session of this series next week, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And it is a safe space in a different format. So Dr. Shirley will be there as well next week. And any of the other panelists, I'm just extending an invitation. If you would like to be a part next week, email me. You're welcome to do so. I've greatly enjoyed our time together today. So with that, I will bid you all good evening. Vote, wear your masks, social distance, stay in your house when you can. Y'all
wash your damn hands.
Wash your hands with soap and water. All right, y'all. Have a great evening. Bye.